What's up, Vikings fans? Welcome back to another edition of Vikings Spin. I'm your host, Jason, and the 2019 NFL Draft is in the books for the Minnesota Vikings. I put out an article on Purple PTSD and also on our Facebook and Twitter pages about the a Vikings draft class recap. We have player profiles, highlights, and analysis of each pick. All the 12 picks that the Vikings chose in the draft. And today we're going to talk about the roster reset, so to speak, and how the 2019 draft class is going to impact the Vikings roster going forward. So we'll go through each of the positions on the roster, and we'll look at and see as we go along where the draft picks fit in. So we'll start with the quarterbacks. Obviously, you're going to have at least 4 going into camp, and usually that's how it is through preseason. So I expect, obviously, the starter is Kirk Cousins, and then after that, there's a battle for the backup quarterback job between Kyle Slaughter, Sean Mannion, and recently signed the undrafted free agent Jake Browning. So that could definitely get interesting. I believe Slaughter has the inside track on the number 2, quarterback 2 position. He's played in Gary Kubiak's offense before, and he spent 2 years with Kevin Stefanski here too. So I think he's got a bit of an edge on knowing the system. Although Mannion ran something similar with the Rams, the Vikings interestingly gave Jake Browning quite a bit of guaranteed money for an undrafted free agent. I believe it's $140,000, so they definitely believe in him. But I think it's going to go down where the Vikings are going to wind up keeping 2 quarterbacks on the 53-man roster, and it's my belief that Mannion will get cut and that Jake Browning will go to the practice squad. Moving on to the running backs, Dalvin Cook is a clear-cut starter. Behind him, it's a battle for the number 2 spot between third-round pick Alexander Mattison, veteran running back Amir Abdullah, and then second-year guys in Mike Boone and Rock Thomas. Rock Thomas could be facing some legal issues, so I'm going to say that he's going to be a likely candidate to get cut. He might make the practice squad, he might not. I would say that making the roster, obviously Cook, and then I'm going to say that Alexander Mattison, the third-round pick, is going to win the RB2 spot. So he'll be the primary backup to Cook and the 1-2 punch on game day, where he's going to see a good amount of snaps and probably take over the Latavius Murray role. And then I do believe that they're going to keep 4 running backs on the roster just with as much as they're going to want to run the ball. I think Amir Abdullah carves out a role for himself as a kick returner, so his special teams work will get him a roster spot, and I do think they like Mike Boone's upside enough to keep him as a 4th running back. Moving on to fullback, C.J. Ham. They didn't really bring in any serious competition other than a UDFA. Who was a running back in college trying to make the transition to fullback. So I think that's a slam dunk for C.J. Ham. He's on a cheap tender right now, so there's no reason to let him go. So Ham will be the fullback. And that brings the total roster count for the 53. 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, and a fullback, so we're up to 7 right now. I think the Vikings are going to wind up keeping 6 wide receivers. Obviously, you have the 2 superstars and Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, your Pro Bowl guys, Pro Bowl caliber, Pro Bowler in Adam Thielen, and I would say Pro Bowl caliber in Stephon Diggs. I'm thinking that he'll probably earn his first Pro Bowl this year. I'm going to call it right now. And then behind them, you've got question marks on who's going to be the number 3 guy. It's my belief that Laquan Treadwell is going to get traded at some point before the season starts. That would leave it to a battle between Jordan Taylor, the recently signed free agent, and the 2 rookies, Olabisi Johnson, Dylan Mitchell. as well as Chad Beebe, Brandon Zylstra, Jeff Badette, and a slew of UDFAs that they brought in my opinion, it's probably going to be. I like these 7th-round rookies because of what they can do on special teams in terms of return man ability. For Johnson, he's a pretty solid route runner and has good hands. Dylan Mitchell was highly productive and has really good speed. I can see both of these guys, because they have special teams ability, making the bottom end of the roster as the 5th and 6th guys. And they might surprise you and move up the depth chart a little bit. But I think both of these guys are actually going to make the roster. So that would be, let's see, 3 with Taylor, plus those 2 rookies would be 5. Excuse me, and then a battle between Beebe, Zylstra, and Badette for the 6th. If they don't bring in another veteran or wide receiver, let's say if they don't re-sign Aldrick Robinson, then I think Chad Beebe would fill that other spot, and that would be your 6 receivers. Moving on to tight ends. Despite the speculation, I don't think the Vikings are going to, at this point, trade Kyle Rudolph, because the time that would have been most valuable to do that would have been during the draft. They did not do that. Now I think with Gary Kubiak loving to run 2 tight end sets, Stefanski feeling the same way, I think you're going to see a lot of 2 tight end sets, even some 3 tight end sets this season, as the Vikings are going to look to establish the run and run a lot of play action off of that and create mismatches with their tight ends. Kyle Rudolph is going to be the starter with Irv Smith Jr. As the tight end 2, seeing a lot of time on the field. I think he's going to get an awful lot of snaps and targets, and he's going to be very productive. And David Morgan is a rock-solid blocker. I see him as the 3rd tight end. I don't think they're going to carry 4 tight ends on the roster, so I see Tyler Conklin getting cut, but I think they'll be interested in keeping him on the practice squad. So that's my prediction for the tight ends, and then that would bring us to, let's see, 13 with the receivers plus another 3, so that's 16 players so far. Moving on to the offensive line, I see them keeping 9 offensive linemen. The starters from left to right, I think it's going to be Riley Reif at left tackle, Pat Elflein at left guard, Garrett Bradbury at center, Josh Klein at right guard, and Brian O'Neill at right tackle. So Bradbury, the 1st-round rookie, he's going to come in and be the starting center right away. And then you're going to have the 4 backups. The 4th-round rookie, Drew Samia, I think he's going to be the 1st guard off the bench. You're going to have Brett Jones as the backup center. And then you're also going to have Rashad Hill as the swing tackle. And then the 9th offensive lineman, I'm going to give that to Fabian Collins, because he's got the ability to play both the guard and tackle position, so he's going to be your utility O-line backup. Moving on, so that brings us to 25 guys. Let's go to the defensive line. I'm going to alter my prediction a little bit here with Armand Watts. At first I said he was going to be a practice squad guy. I watched a little bit more of the film and reassessed the Vikings roster a little bit, and I do think he's going to make the roster. I think that they're going to go with Linval Joseph and Shamar Stephen. Those are going to be your 2 starters at defensive tackle. Behind that, it's going to be Jaleel Johnson. You're going to have Jalen Holmes make it as a defensive tackle / defensive end, but he's going to settle more into that defensive tackle role this year, because he did put on some weight to get to 300 pounds, and the Vikings are excited about him as a pass rushing 3-tech now. And I think Armand Watts, though, is going to make the roster. I don't think that they want to risk him to the practice squad. He's got a lot of upside to provide as a run stuffer and a pass rusher as a 3-tech as well. So I think he makes it. So that would be 5 defensive linemen, and then they're going to carry 4 defensive ends to round out the D-line. I see them, obviously Everson Griffin and Danielle Hunter will be the starters. Stephen Weatherly is your third defensive end. And I think Afadi Odenigbo will beat out Tayshawn Bauer for the fourth defensive end and ninth defensive lineman spot. So that's my hot take there. As they also mentioned, Afadi's really changed his body this year. And we'll see what kind of dividends that pays for him and the Vikings moving forward. But I think that's going to be your defensive lineman. So that brings the total up to 34 players. I think they're going to keep 6 linebackers. I do see the starters remaining the same. Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, and Ben Gideon will be your 3 starting linebackers. Behind them, it's going to be Eric Wilson as the primary outside linebacker backup. I think Cameron Smith, the 5th round rookie, earns the backup middle linebacker spot. And from last year, Devontae Downs is a guy that can play both middle and outside, and I think he's going to make the roster over Kentrell Brothers, who I think they're ready to move on from. And so that brings us to 40 players. I see the Vikings carrying 6 cornerbacks, and that's going to be Xavier Rhodes and Trey Waynes as the outside starters. I think now that Mike Hughes is healthy, he's going to be your excuse me, starting nickel corner, who would also play outside to spell guys or due to an injury. Mac Alexander will still see some slot snaps, as well as your 4th cornerback. Holton Hill, once he's off suspension for 4 games, will be the 5th corner, and I think Chris Boyd's going to make it as your cornerback 6. Now, when Hill is suspended for the first 4 games, I do think that they'll carry a 3rd quarterback, Jake Browning, on the roster, and they're gonna use that extra 4 weeks to evaluate him and have him battle Kyle Slaughter for the backup job, which I ultimately think Slaughter will win out. But it'll be nice to protect Browning for 4 weeks and not expose him to the practice squad. Give a little extra time for that backup quarterback competition while Hill is out. But then they'll move Browning to the practice squad once Hill comes back. At safety, I see the Vikings keeping 4 guys rostered. That's going to be Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris as the starters. J-Ron Curse as the primary backup and big nickel package guy. And then I think they're going to go with Deron Smith as the 4th safety. He's got a little bit more experience playing, and I think he'll get that 4th safety spot. Now they'll have Marcus Epps battling in there, I think, for the 5th safety spot, and I think they're only going to carry 4, and Epps is going to go to the practice squad. And also having a shot at the practice squad will be Stephon Diggs' little brother, Marshawn Diggs, who they invited for a rookie minicamp tryout, if he makes it, I think. Now, moving on to the specialists. So between now the corners and the safeties, you just added 10 more to the 40, so now we're at 50. Got room for 3 more specialists. I think Dan Bailey and Matt Weil are going to make it. And then at long snapper, I see Kevin McDermott as this year's long snapper. Austin Cutting might have some service time that his obligation requires him to fill. So he may spend a couple years on the practice squad because of that. The Vikings are trying to see if they can get that worked around, but I think if he can get it worked around, he's got a shot to beat McDermott out. But if he does have to fulfill that obligation and it's not going to quite work with the schedule, then I think McDermott will make it. But that's how I see the 53-man roster shaking out. And looking at that, I think the Vikings have a very solid roster. I think they have enough to make the playoffs. and perhaps do some damage once they get in there. Anything can happen. Um, Let me know your thoughts on the Vikings roster reset and what roles you see the rookies playing. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and encourage others to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So I thank you guys for tuning in to another edition of Viking Spin, and we'll see you next time. Take care.